Welcome to Living Room Talks with Sarah Jane. We are so excited to have you join us today. And I'm Sarah Jane, and here at Living Room Talks, we discuss everyday topics that impact women no matter what stage of life they are in. We are here to inspire, empower, and equip women to live a life that they love. And today, I really wanted to delve into the topic of what it means to own our story, the importance of our story, and if we don't really like our story, what can we do about it? You know, God has created each one of us uniquely, and within each one of us is a story to be found, to be told, to be explored, and maybe even be restored. And today, to help me explore this concept even more, I have asked Amanda Viviers to join me on the show. Amanda is an author, a speaker, a radio presenter. She has published 13 books and can be found in her beach shack right in her next 3. She's also the creative director at Compassion Australia, the co-founder of Kinwomen, a radio program designed to help women thrive, and the co-founder of Change Your Story events, creates retreats that help people rewrite their story. She's wife to Charl and mum of Maximus and Liberty, and she lives a creative life longing to see people live inspired. Welcome to the show, Amanda.
Thank you so much for having me.
So good to have you on board. And I'm so impressed and inspired by the list of things that you do. And I wonder, how do you find the time to do all of that?
Sometimes I question my life choices, especially as it gets towards the end of a year and all things start to clash together. But truly, I think what I have learned to do is just live in the moment and also live in the future well. So I don't get too stuck in about 2 weeks' time. I'm really good at planning and then I'm really good at staying present in the moment. And when we do that, then I think you can do more than what you think.
That's amazing. I love that. And I would love to give our listeners a bit of an idea of the guests that come on this show. Amanda, what do you like to do in your spare time with your family or leading up to Christmas?
Oh, I love Christmas so much. My husband is not a Christmas Grinch, but he is very firmly that Christmas starts on the 1st of December. Yep. So whereas I'm the kind of person that does play carols in the office in October, and I think I have my birthday in October, and I feel like once my birthday's done, it's like Christmas. So I have learned over the last little season to just slowly drop little Christmas things around my house to, 1, annoy my husband, but to 2, make everyone laugh. So last week I did put Christmas toilet paper in both of the toilets, and my husband just came out shaking his head. And this week I have put a Christmas floor mat out the front, and at Halloween I put a wreath on the front door. And he was like, "What's the wreath for?" I'm like, "It's just, getting rid of the Halloween juju's." And he's laughing. He's like, "You are just incomprehensible." So that's what I do. I try to have a bit of fun and, lots of creative stuff with my family.
So good. And I love Christmas too. And I'm super excited. Around this time on Netflix, a whole bunch of really cheesy Christmas movies come out, and I just love it. Like, I could watch all of them, and it's a little bit sad, but it gets me every time.
On my blog each year, I do a 24, like an advent calendar, but for movies, and I have all these people who follow them and watch them. So yeah, it's fantastic. Love it.
I might have to follow that list, Amanda. So today we're talking about stories, and it might be a new concept for some people, what it means to have a story and what it means to own our story. Can you just tell us or explain what it means, what having a story means, and why owning our story is so important?
Sure. Well, I believe that everybody has a story. I'm the kind of person that believes that everybody could write a book. And it can be controversial sometimes, especially my editor. She's like, can you please stop telling everyone that they can write a book? And I was just like, but they can. Just because from a communication point of view, they might have to grow in how they tell it. We each and every one of us has a story, and there's a narrative that has shaped our life, and there are parts of our stories that in some ways can hold us captive to the narrative that we've believed, and we can get stuck in that story. So I feel really passionate about, one, empowering women towards the fact that their story matters and that there is indeed somebody who needs their story. And secondly, to help them find their voice and confidence to be able to share that in a way that you learn with insight from your story, and truly what you feel like your sense of purpose is, and the opportunity for the future to be able to really discover more of who you've been called to be.
That's amazing. And I wonder if some of the women listening today might go, okay, maybe I have a story, but I don't really like my story, and I don't really want to own my story because of whatever's happened. What would you say to that?
I would say it's a struggle and a potential that we all have, like a challenge and an opportunity, really, is probably a better way to describe it, to either own the narrative that holds us captive, or to believe in the potential of what our future self could be. And it's that place of overcoming, it's that place of reinvention. You know, the last 2 years, I know we all talk about it, but the last 2 years has been a place of reinvention. It's been a tearing down for us of maybe stuff that we've built our story upon. And it really brings us back to our sense of value of, who are we? What's our contribution in the world? What's our character? What is it that we want our life to be built upon? And who are our community? Who are the people that come alongside us? And I think sometimes we can reframe our story by the structure, if we were looking at it from an architectural point of view, by the structure of what others have said that our story is, rather than the true foundation of what the potential of our story can be. So be defined not by your past, by the potential for your future. And I think that will change your lens with which you look at your own story.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And so say someone is sitting there and going, okay, I want to start changing my story, changing the narrative for my future. What would be some practical ways they can do that?
I think really coming back to your sense of your value base and what you believe about different parts of your story. So, for example, sorry, I'm just going to reach down and grab one of my books. I wrote this book with a clinical psychologist, and it's called Awake, Live in Your New Story. And what we do is we speak in the book about 4 different pillars of our life where our story can be held stuck. And so the first one is our identity, that sense of identity of who you are, and really exploring what you believe about yourself and what you believe about your identity. And some of what I was just talking about, but who have you believed someone else's narrative for your own life rather than the truth of who you have been purposed to be? The second part is really understanding our narrative, or the part of our story when it comes to beauty. And I think as women, that idea of, and that's exactly what a lot of what you're writing is about. I think we believe what other people tell us is beautiful, or what beauty is. But when we re-explore that and we really discover that, you know, like I really see it in having a small daughter, and the way that even she walks past a mirror. Last week, I saw her walk past a mirror because it was a free dress day at school. So she's used to wearing the uniform all the time, but then it was a free dress day, and she walked past, and I saw her kind of like wrinkle her nose at herself. Like it was like, you know, it was just kind of like, it wasn't anything major. It was just like that's the formation of story. And so I just stopped her and I was like, babes, what just happened when you looked in the mirror then? And she's like, I don't know. Do I look okay? And that was a moment where I could reform the voice that has created her story around what is beautiful and what that means, and that sense of confidence and insecurity. And particularly for women, that can be a big thing. But beauty is not external. Beauty is internal. It's that sense of who you are. And that's the power of your story. That's the gift that we give to others, the impression that we leave upon them. And I think there's parts of our society that just get so stuck on the external rather than this sense of the true inner essence of who you are, that you impact people, that you leave a mark, that you make the world a better place, that you, for me, I have like this heartfelt desire that the train of, like, you know, the wake behind my life, if I was a boat, that the wake is one where people are better, that they've encountered me than not, you know. And that's inner beauty. That's that sense of empathy for others and being able to listen. And that's what's beautiful. That's what's truly beautiful. And then there is another part of our book, which is all about authority. And I think when it comes to sharing our story, when we understand who gives us authority to speak with our story and what parts of our story are important, we can be held captive to what people have said about us before. You know, I remember a year or so ago, I walked into a cafe. I'm kind of off on a tangent. I hope that's okay.
Totally fine. Go for it.
I walked into a cafe and I saw my year 10 English teacher. I hadn't seen her since school, at least 25 years. So you can kind of pitch the age of where I'm at. I saw her and I was just like, oh my gosh, there is Mrs. ... And I was like, and I just remember what it was like to be 15, to be poetic, to be crazy creative, and the box that the school system tried to fit me into. And I remember some of the comments. I remember things that were written on essays. I remember all of that. And it all comes rushing back to you in one moment, right? And so she walks over to me and she's like, Amanda Powell, that was my name before I got married. Amanda Powell, what do you do now? Like, she was like shocked to see me. And I said, I just didn't want to tell her what I did. And I was just like, because she was my English teacher. And it was just like, oh, I'm an author. And I was like, you'd think that I would want to tell my English teacher that I've written all these books. I've done so much to help people write their story. I sit in that place of teaching all the time. It was remembering who I had given my authority to as a teenager, of the power of my story and what was happening within my story. I had allowed different authority figures to shape the narrative with which I believed what my authority came from, even though I'm a published author from traditional publishing, co-publishing, like I've got all these books on Amazon, and I still had this little 15-year-old that wanted to shrink back and go, but there's grammar mistakes in what I do. I don't write in the same way that other people do, but I'm called to share my story. And grammar, writing conventions, the way we speak, the platforms that we find ourselves on, they don't dictate our authority. What dictates our authority is our sense of confidence in understanding our identity, beauty, the beauty of story, authority. And then the last part of our book is all about self-compassion, really understanding and listening to the critical voices that tell us that we're not good enough, that we're not, that why should you share your story? And all of those voices often come from other places of authority, of identity forming, different parts of our stories that do hold us captive. So I actually wrote it with a clinical psychologist. Her name is Anne. And it's such a great privilege. We run retreats where we help women find their story, communicate their story, and understand in those different themes. So that was a very long answer to your question, but it's something I so believe in. So once you open up that can of worms with me, I will not stop.
But it's so powerful, Amanda. Like, I felt you were talking to me just then. Like, there's so much authority in what you were saying. And I was thinking about women who feeling a bit stuck. You know, they feel like they're called to do so and so, but it's that internal narrative that's holding them back. Can you tell us, in those moments where you feel that, you know, you had the incident with your teacher, what are some of the things that you kind of go through to help you overcome that negative narrative?
I can even talk about the way that I parent my children, because I find that has been such an insightful place for my own story. So, for example, on Wednesday, it was parent-teacher interviews for my little boy and my little girl. And I was working, so I couldn't go to them, and my husband went to them. And my little girl rarely gets in trouble. I would probably say she struggles a bit with perfectionism. And she got in trouble on the day of the parent-teacher interview. It was like the worst day of the whole year you could get in trouble. And she did something really silly, you know. And but she was distraught. What did the teacher say? I never get in trouble. And she was so upset. And that night when I saw her, I was like, hey, how was your day? I didn't know any of the story. She's like, I don't really want to go to school tomorrow, Mum. And I said, why? What happened? Did you have a disagreement with someone? She was like, did Dad tell you? It was like the drama of the century. And so I eventually sat down with her. I sat on her bed and I was listening and reframing. And this is my point to answer your question, is I started speaking through with her. And I asked her, what is it that's telling you that you can't make mistakes? What is it that's telling you that you can't fail? Because if we're not failing, we're not innovating, we're not trying anything new, which means we're not growing. And that means we're stuck in our story. So I'm talking to her. My 7-year-old does have a whiteboard in her room. The apple does not fall far from the tree. Anyway, I didn't put it there. She went and got it from my office and put it up in her room only a week or so before this. And she goes and grabs a whiteboard marker and she writes in big letters on her whiteboard in her room, I am allowed to make mistakes.
Wow.
And so I wonder, what is your I am statement?
That's
what
amazing.
is holding you stuck? Because in the last 48 hours since that incident happened, I have asked her that question over and over again. And I just whisper to her when she starts to be like, I don't want to go back to school, or it's the dancing concert and I don't want to miss out on rehearsal because it's your work Christmas party, or, you know, there's the context of what happens in everyday life. She thought she'd left her homework folder in her dad's car this morning, and I just go to her, I am allowed. And then she goes, to make mistakes. And I wonder what it is that you're telling yourself that holds you stuck in your story. What are you not allowing yourself to do that you need to give yourself permission for? Permission is so powerful. I start every one of my retreats in a place of permission. What do you give yourself permission right now to do? I give myself permission to change. I give myself permission to be kind to myself. I give myself permission to not always have everything sorted. I give myself permission to be present. I give myself permission to grow. I give myself permission to become. I give myself permission to not be okay.
Wow.
And you will find in one of those sentences that something has resounded in you. And what I want to encourage you to do is just lean into the resound. Lean in and be curious to that part of yourself that is just holding on too tightly to something. You know, like the body is the most powerful, beautiful thing that I believe was made by a creative God that wanted us to be responsive and intuitive and beautiful in all different ways. But my husband is a personal trainer, and he said to me, you know, Amanda, when you pull or hurt or break a muscle or a bone, what happens is that every other muscle around it contracts to protect that weakness. And when we then take that to our internal sense of self and soul, when there's a part of us that is hurting, the muscles that were created to protect it kind of lock into that. Because they want to be able to protect that part of ourselves that makes us, well, that's vulnerable. But the beauty of this kind of personal development work that you do so much beautiful work of, Sarah, is to be able to actually just go, okay, I am safe. I am able to not hold that story. And it takes time to be able to do that with, it's just like recovering a pulled, strained muscle. It takes time, but you have to remember to release that part of the story. And as you do that, I believe that there's then insight that comes from that. And you look at it and you go, I am allowed to make mistakes.
Wow.
And that's where healing happens. And for me, I believe that writing is such a powerful tool, journaling. And that's what most of my books are about, you know, is that sense of writing to heal and the insight that comes. And I think sometimes we can think that self-orientated growth, like self-leadership, or I think there's a narrative that says that it's selfish. It's actually not. It's actually about maturity and emotional well-being, and really being confident in who we are and what triggers us in the midst of difficult times. And when you unpack that part of your story, that's why story is so powerful. It's like our story becomes the muscles that keep us contained, but also it's the part of revelation and wisdom of lived experience. And that's what resilience is. It's that sense of, where are the places that I've been built to learn that I can then reveal and show to others? And in showing and teaching, you know, that's why I say yes to stuff like this, you know, like actually I'm not really, I don't know if this sounds controversial, I don't really care where this goes. Like, I care about the people, but I'm not interested in platforms or like opportunities, or I'm just not interested at all. What I'm interested in is first and foremost me learning from my own mistakes. And this kind of conversation is my own learning place. And so I'm like, whoever is listening, come back to those tension parts, those trigger parts, and see if there's a way that you can unveil them for your future self.
Amazing. And I feel like your desire to help women comes through in what you just shared just then, Amanda. It was so powerful. Almost made me feel that I'm just going to stop this interview and then write my own I am statements.
I love
just
that.
because I feel like that's so powerful, and I'm going to do it after our time today. And I definitely recommend women that are listening to do it, to take that authority back. And you may have to sit in the uncomfortable, but it's worth it in the end. And Amanda, you touched on something before about sharing our stories with other people. I feel like that can be really hard, especially if your story has pain or brokenness in it. Why do you think it's so important for us to share our story with other people?
Well, I think it's a little bit what I was just saying, that it's actually we learn and grow. Resilience is built, and we find, I don't think you ever stop learning, by the way. Like, I celebrated with my grandma on Sunday her 98th birthday.
Wow.
And then on Tuesday I took her out, and she's still learning. You know, like my grandma asked for a ring for her birthday, for her 98th birthday.
Oh.
She wanted her birthstone, which was a topaz. So we brought her a blue topaz ring with diamonds around it. And she's actually blind, and so she can't see it. But there's this sense within her. There's this sense within her that beauty and story and celebration is important, you know. And she's 98 and still learning. And that's why I believe the stories that we tell, she's telling me stories. She's telling me stories I've never heard before. I think there's a thin place, the older that you get, where you realize I do have, like, time is limited, and I do have only a small amount of time to be able to share the stories that are like treasures and jewels that are on the inside of us. But I think sometimes there's stories that need safe places for us to be able to unpack them, to find the wisdom of them first before they're ready for public places. And I think the unfortunate part of the society that we now live in I do think it's unfortunate. I think it's awesome, but also terrible that every person has a platform. And I feel like the platform being public means that those stories then define us, sometimes way before we're ready to understand the insight that's required from them. So I would be very careful who I share the stories with and the amount of time and distance that I have between the stories, so that the stories don't define me in a way that I haven't found the insight yet that is to come from them. So I do heaps of teaching about sharing our stories safely and finding ways to reinvent and discover the resilience on the inside of them. And yeah, I think having really great mentors and people around us that really hold us accountable to the decisions that we make and the ways that we share things. And it doesn't mean we can't be authentic. You know, for me, like, I'm really, really passionate about honesty and authenticity. But at the same time, there are different circles of safety and circles of influence that you can trust with those stories. So, I think it's an interesting thing for you to come back to your own sense of boundaries around storytelling and the ways that you do it safely. And I think we should always question the agenda with which we're sharing our story. So am I on social media about to tell a story and the agenda is to hurt someone else, even in the manipulation of the facts of the way that we share it? Are we writing something? Can we sit there and we're like, I want people to know that I am successful? And we need to unpack the agenda of that. It's like, why, even if we just ask ourselves, why am I sharing this story? And then we just go, actually, I really feel inspired and I want to help someone else. Go for it. Do it with safety, do it with boldness, learn from it. But if there's any part of it that has an agenda attached to it, even something that we don't even realize is there, you know, like kind of like the attachments that come on computers. I have no idea. It's like there's all these like random cookie attachments. So we need to think about what is the agenda with which we're sharing stories, because so much damage can be done. And especially because everyone has a platform with which they can wield. Are you wielding it, or are you organically sharing in a way that brings inspiration and hope?
And that's a great reminder. I think that's where asking God for wisdom comes into play, because it doesn't mean each one of us then goes out and shares our story on Facebook. But it could mean we're talking to a friend and they're going through something we've gone through, and God goes, it's time to share. So it's really important distinguishing wisdom around sharing your story. And that's really great. And so as we come to the end of the year, Amanda, it's been a huge year for so many people. What are some things that we can do to start to reflect on the year that's been, but also start to prepare us for the year to come?
Well, one thing that I have created as a habit at the end of each year is that I have a process that I ask myself the same questions. And I've done it for 18 years.
That's amazing.
18 years. So I'm going to show you something. You ready? This is my little journal that I started 18 years ago. And I wrote this little statement here. It's very messy. Like, I am messy. That's why my screen is blurred, everyone. Play the movie forward. This should affect the decisions that you make. What do you want your life to be like in 2033? 2033 felt like, it was like, I don't even know if I'll make it to 2033. It felt like so old. And then at the end of it, I was like 57 years old. So I'll be 57. Oh gosh, blurring. Can you see it? Oh, you can't see it.
No.
I'll be, it's so funny. Look at me. I'll be 57. And this is what I said. I will be 57 years old. I'll be content in who I am. I'll be a grandma, loving spending time with my family, influencing the world, loving God intimately. I want to be involved in a local church. I want to be involved in the everyday of my family's life. creative, healthy, wise, and in love with my husband. And back then, like, I had been single for 10 years. Like, there was just so many parts of my story. I had no idea whether I would be a mum. I had no idea whether I would have a husband. So here it is. Here we go. I don't know if you can kind of, so these are my 18 years. I don't know if it's going to help me. I don't know. The screen is like, nope, you're not doing it.
You can see bits of it.
There you go. So you've probably seen all my secrets now. So anyway, what I have done is over the last 7 years is I've published these in the form of both downloadable and books. And so each year they have a different name, but this year's is called Dear Future Self. So on New Year's Eve, I go and find a lovely cafe. I write down what cafe I'm in. I write down what I'm drinking. I write down the word that has defined the year. I write down a verse from scripture that's inspired me. And so I've got 18 years of this now that I go back and I go, okay, 2018, the word that defined my year was empathy. 2016, the word that defined my year was grounded. 2014, what defined my year is that broken crayons, they still color. And then I go back and I go, 2010, God created Genesis week out of the chaos of my life. 2018 was intense. 2009, stretching, and it goes back and back and back. And I get to understand and unpack. And what I see is these building blocks of what God's been doing across decades of my life.
Wow.
And the insight that comes from that is like, it's like you become the mentor of your own story, which sounds so weird. It's truly insight from God, but it's truly lived experience.
Yeah.
And so I can look back and go, 18 years ago, I was struggling with this. And guess what? I'm still struggling with it. But then I can go, 18 years ago, I did not know if I would be a mum. I did not know if I would get married. I did not know if I would ever be able to buy my own house. There were so many different things that for me felt super defining and super scary. But to create the desire of with which I really believe my life was being drawn towards, and to clarify and to finish off the bookend of something and to say, okay, next year I'm going to focus on this. Last year, this year, my one word was playful. So the whole year I've just been like, Amanda, is this playful? Because 2020 was so serious. I was like, oh my gosh, I need a bit of playful. And I nailed it? I don't think so, but I've tried. It's brought focus. So what I do is I spend a couple of hours journaling. I say goodbye to 2021 with kindness, and I step into 2022 with clarity. It's not about New Year's resolutions. It's about really reframing habits. And I believe that journaling really involves different parts of our psyche, our self, our spirit in ways that it brings insight, wisdom, resilience, hope in a way that I can't really see many other things do.
Wow. And that Dear Future Self book is available now for us to purchase. Is that right?
Yep. It's on Amazon, Angus and Robinson, Book Depository, Booktopia, my website.
Excellent. So I am going to leave the link to the book in the comments. And Amanda, you've also graciously given us 25% off the book. Is that right?
Yes, from my website. So
amazing.
It's actually hard to find discounts on my book, especially because it's newly released. But I knew I was doing this, and I really wanted whoever really wants to sit down and have a process that they can work through. So I call it an end of year guided journal. So it's question after question that you can ask yourself and find clarity for the new.
Amazing. I'm so excited. I'm definitely going to be purchasing myself one of these books. And what a great way to end the year and to start 2022. Crazy 2022. Who would have thought?
I know. 2033 is coming.
Yes, it is coming. It'll be here before we know it, Amanda, which is crazy. But as we wrap up today, it's been so beautiful. Is there any final comments or remarks that you'd like to share with women?
Give yourself permission to sit down by yourself, turn everything else off, and just write and see what comes.
Wow. Love that. So simple, but yet so profound. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Amanda. It's been wonderful. Thank you for your insight, for your experience, and for your passion, and for your time.
No worries at all. It's been such a pleasure, and have the best 2022, everyone.
Yes. And that's it from us. If you enjoy these interviews that I do, please subscribe to my channel. But until next time, see you then. Thank you, everyone. Bye.